Looking back on the week that was and forward to the week ahead. It's the Fantasy Football Hustle. Waiver wire, trades, roster management. To win in fantasy football, you must remember one simple rule. Never get out hustled. It's the Fantasy Football Hustle. Here are your hosts, Brian Drake and Dwayne McFarland.
Hey, good afternoon, fantasy football world. What's going on out there? Long time no talk. It's your friend Brian Drake and Dwayne McFarland coming at you with another episode of the Fantasy Football Hustle. You, of course, can catch us over at fightingchancefantasy.com. Follow us on Twitter at Drake Fantasy and at Dwayne McFarland, spelled at D-W-A-I-N, McFarland. And, of course, hey, follow the show on Twitter at FF Hustle. We're a proud member of the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast Network with ffchamps.com. And we have quite the special show today. So what we do on our podcast is we take a guy from Syracuse and a guy from Texas, and we mash them together. Today what we're going to do is we're going to bring a guy who went to school in Syracuse and went and got a law degree in Texas, and he knows infinitely more about fantasy football than I'll ever hope to try to imagine. But, Dwayne, we've got Sigmund Bloom from Football Guys on today.
Absolutely. Welcome, Sig.
Oh, it's good to be here with and Dwayne. I think we'll be seeing each other, rubbing elbows a lot more professionally in the near future. And so it's a special day on that front too. And I think this is a fun time for us to talk about fantasy football because we have been getting a drizzle of information, a light mist from OTAs and minicamp, and it's starting to allow us to firm up our starting considerations for players, teams, offenses, etc., going into training camp. But training camp should move the needle on some of these things. But we have a pause, a nice month to just let that stuff marinate in our head and then get to it. And the next thing we know, like, all the people in our lives recognize us again. It's January and we're live again.
So what we want to do here today is kind of pick Sig's brain. And of course, you listen to his amazing podcast, The Audible, which you can find on iTunes and over at footballguys.com, where he only has 80,000 Twitter followers. So if you're not following at Sigmund Bloom, what the hell are you doing out there? Let's start first with the Cardinals offense. Cliff Kingsbury's coming to town. He's bringing his air raid attack. And everyone's gaga now over Kyler Murray. And is David Johnson back? And he's going to have a resurgent year. And he's got all these young wide receivers. He's going to have 4 or 5 wide all the time. I want to see, because I think you two might differ a little bit on this offense and how it's going to go. Let's get your take first off on the offense in general, Kyler Murray, and where the value is going to come from in this offense.
Yeah, and the value could really come from anywhere and from a lot of different places at once too. And I'm glad to get to talk to a different audience than my audience, because I always predicate this speech with, you're probably tired of hearing me say this already. But we don't know how good, and when I say how good for fantasy football, we don't know how high the numbers could be out of this offense. And I'm the narrative street. So some of these things that I like to bring up, like the Cliff Kingsbury, Kyler Murray love affair, like try to recount another time in football that there was a coach who had eyes for a quarterback for 5 or 6 years and also was going to happen to be implementing a pure, aggressive, attack-based offense for the first time without any dilution in the NFL. And he has that quarterback. It's like destiny. And it could be a flop. It could be comical. It's going to be entertaining no matter what. They also have a defense that's going to be without Patrick Peterson for the first 6 weeks. And I sense from their personnel moves and just the overall posture of this organization that they're letting Cliff Kingsbury run with this the same way that Philly let Chip Kelly run with it. Like, go, do your thing. We hired you to do your thing. Do your thing. You want to tie your career to Kyler Murray? Fine. We're tying the whole franchise to Kyler Murray, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The numbers could overflow. We saw Tampa Bay's offense kind of push the limit last year in terms of keeping a number of players relevant week to week that we wouldn't have anticipated. All the guys all the way down to like Adam Humphries were reasonable plays in typical leagues. And I think something similar could happen with Arizona. And David Johnson, we know, is one of the 5 most talented running backs in the league. Now, last year he was in the worst Stone Age offense in the NFL. Now he's got a coach who at every stop, Kingsbury has just looked at what he's got and tried to use what he has. Well, what you have first and foremost is David freaking Johnson. So that's exciting. Any of these receivers, Butler, Isabella, Yes, Christian Kirk. Christian Kirk, 6th, 7th round of drafts are tough because that's where you want to swing for the fences, like swing for your toes for the home run. That's like a Darrell Henderson part of the draft. That's a Christian Kirk, Kiki Cutie part of the draft. So I just think that it's exciting to have an offense, and we can go back to the Chip Kelly Eagles. And the other thing is the NFL is kind of slow to adapt. They do eventually adapt, but they're slow. And some of the things that are going to be working in September, October might not work by December or by 2020. But for fantasy football, and I was thinking about this for DFS those first early weeks, messing around with the Arizona heavy lineups, because I just don't think these defenses are going to be fully prepared for what they have to face.
I agree. Dwayne, what are your thoughts here? I know you're a big guy with Christian Kirk. You love him. You think he's going to be a stud. You're also you were big on Andy Isabella. Larry Fitzgerald now is going to move, we think, to the outside, and to me, that's just going to crush his value because I don't think he can win out there. Which of these wide receivers are you looking forward to, and how early do you go in on a guy like Christian Kirk?
Yeah, I think it's like Bloom said, we could literally just be surprised, by where it comes from, and it could be different every week, based on the game plan and, what it is that Cliff Kingsbury has up his sleeve based on the defense that they're going to be facing. I lean to Kirk just because, he's in his second year. He actually did pretty good for, like Bloom said, playing in a Stone Age offense last year. So I like elements of his game, anticipating that he'll work more as the flanker. He'll be working underneath, he'll be sliding into the slot some, but he also has some big playability. So he's just the guy I'm putting the chip on, which most people are. He's the first receiver typically being drafted. And it's like Bloom said, you're going to have to take him in a round where it is kind of that swing for the fences. So it's just really pick your poison. Or do you want that upside at receiver? Do you want that upside at runner? So it's going to be based on your roster construction at that point in the draft. My biggest positives for Arizona that so the things I feel like will be stable no matter what, to Sig's point, it could go either way. It could be really good. There could be moments where it's really bad. But I think the big positives are, tempo. They're going to run a lot of plays. Kingsbury wants to run a lot of plays. So I've got them projected for the second most plays in the league. If you're into passing, he's going to pass. He passed about a 60-40 split during his time at Texas Tech. And, those were, and that was with teams where they were typically around 500. So they were trailing and winning, games typically about the same amount of time. I do think they could trail more this season. So you could potentially see the passing versus running bump up to like a 62, 63 versus 47 versus 37. They could be the most pass heavy team in the league. I think right now I have Pittsburgh ranked just slightly ahead of them in my rankings, but I think the positives are, what Bloom laid out. You got a guy that's loved this guy forever. He knows how to run this scheme. My concerns though are, right now, and not to say this is everything. And it's like, we're sitting here thinking about, we don't really know for sure what to think about this because it's this new entity entering into the league, much like Chip Kelly. So right now, Vegas has them at 5 wins. That's my biggest concern is that, and I think the reason Vegas has them there is because there's just so many other components. Sig named one, which is the defense, but I'm very concerned about, the offensive line. And, David Johnson is the one guy that I love David Johnson. Just as a player, I love him. My one concern with David Johnson is just the value of, he was early, back like in April. You could get him in, the early second round. Sometimes he would slip to the mid second round in drafts. Well, now he's a mid first. And so my only concern there, is, okay, I like David Johnson, but if they're going to be behind and if Kyler Murray could snipe rushing touchdowns from him, I've got him at 8 rushing touchdowns right now. And I feel like I wouldn't be surprised if he had 6 or 7, it wouldn't surprise me if he had 9. I have him at 10 total, but where my head's kind of at is I just feel like the safety of like a Devontae Adams or, even a DeAndre Hopkins. I tend to find myself leaning that way. But, if the offense really works out, I mean, I don't know that you really, I guess the way I look at it, you don't make league winners in the first round. You're just trying, not to kill yourself in the first round. So I find myself leaning a little bit the other way, but I still love David Johnson, the player.
You're a big Pittsburgh Steelers fan here, Sig, right?
Yeah. Yes, it's an affliction.
I'm an Eagles fan, so when you talk about Chip Kelly and that 2013 Eagles offense that kind of took the league by storm, I remember that vividly. So we're looking now at a Steelers offense who threw the ball more than anybody last year. They lose Antonio Brown. Obviously, Le'Veon Bell didn't play. So Juju Smith-Schuster is the belle of the ball. Everyone loves Juju this year. He's going to go late first, possibly early to mid-second round. Where is the gold in the black and gold for everybody else? There was a report from The Athletic this week that Dante Moncrief is looking like the 2, and James Washington's a guy that Dwayne has really promoted here on the show. Vance McDonald could take big steps here with Jesse James gone. So being a fan, obviously you follow them closer than most. Where are you going with this Steelers offense?
Yeah, and my neurosis about the Steelers can skew my perceptions. So I can lay out both sides of it, right? Because actually, I want them to innovate. I want them to adapt and evolve in terms of NFL offenses. So that might lead you to fade James Conner a little bit because they should be using Jalen Samuels more. And they obviously love Benny Snell. And Conner himself has said, well, they're going to spread it around more. He wore down at the end of the year. It would make sense. But the Steelers in the recent era just run one guy into the ground, whether it's DeAndre Williams or Le'Veon Bell, or even when Jalen Samuels was in, he was the guy and he was good. So the system produces a ton of numbers. So maybe Conner can still be a value because they're just going to do what they always have done. If you're looking at Ben Roethlisberger like that, he's going to force the ball. So with the Juju, the question is, Keenan Allen was just talking about this, life-changing. Defenses are going to focus on you. And I don't know how Juju Smith-Schuster is going to do in terms of having that amount of coverage. And he may have some long afternoons when certain teams – this is kind of like the Arizona offense, right? There might be some long afternoons where Arizona's porous offensive line or otherwise something tactically, they just get checkmated on it, and it's just a long afternoon. But in those other games, I do think Roethlisberger is just going to force the ball to Juju, and which could allow him to pay off on his second-round ADP, although I'm not necessarily targeting him. And you mentioned maybe the most interesting name, which is Vance McDonald, because between James Washington and Dante Moncrief and Deontay Johnson and Ryan Switzer and Eli Rogers, I mean, those guys are ideal slot receivers. And then again, 21st century NFL offense, you want to take those 5, 6, 7-yard gains that are easy. Like that's kind of part of the running game now, just easy high percentage plays. Those guys represent that. Spread it out more. But I think if he's going to spread it out enough so that someone else's cup other than Juju gets full for fantasy, then it's McDonald. There's chemistry there. He's another player that's been a shelter for him at times. And as the coverage shifts and as you have guys like Moncrief and Washington that can threaten deep, that's going to open things up for McDonald. So McDonald might be the most interesting guy if you like going late at tight end, although I think he's like 8th, 9th, 10th tight end. So you can't be too late, but you can wait and still get him.
Yeah, I'm with Sig. I love Vance McDonald. And I think, like, to your point, Sig, thinking back to the AFC divisional round 2 years ago against the Jaguars when, Antonio Brown got hurt and Juju was seeing coverage from, Ramsey and guys like that. Man, I want to say like McDonald had like 10 or 12 targets that game. Like
it was
he
like
had
10 for 110 or something like that. Yeah.
Right. So I'm with you. I like the idea of Vance McDonald. I mean, the other thing you have is, last year Vance McDonald split time with Jesse James. So he's going to be on the field more. Even if he were just to usurp, say, 70 to 80% of what James left behind and not really take anything that Antonio Brown is leaving behind, I think that squarely puts McDonald in, easily in the top half of the tight end one conversation with, I think, some upside. I mean, I don't know about you, Sig, but like I'm warming to him to the point where I don't see a reason to take Hunter Henry or Eric Ebron in the 6th or 7th when I can get McDonald in the 8th. I put him in the same tier.
Yeah, I'll just interject and I'll throw it back to you, Drake. That basically the way I early tight end drafting, I still like Kelsey, maybe even enough to take him in the first round, take him early. Otherwise, Howard and Cook are fascinating at their ADP. They do have an ability to exceed the ADP value. But then I agree with you. Then you're sliding down to McDonald. And then if you're not hitting on McDonald, you got Dallas Goedert, you've got Mark Andrews. And, that's an okay place to be if you keep kicking tight end down the road and just taking those guys and seeing how it turns out. McDonald's got to be part of your tight end strategy, though.
Absolutely. And part of your strategy is going to include what you do in round 3. When you get to this round, you're going to hit this log jam of running backs, okay? The Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, Leonard Fournette, Kerryon Johnson, Aaron Jones tier. And you got to plant a flag on one of these guys, probably in the 3rd round. Otherwise, running back really dries up and you're just, kind of twisting in the wind. So of those guys, who do you like most? Let's call this a PPR setup. And, where do you want to go?
So, and I'll also mention with your lead in too, that the third round, especially if you're picking in the first half of the third round, is also where you may see Keenan Allen or AJ Green or T.Y. Hilton complicating things. But without a doubt, the names you rattled off all have within their range of outcomes, like a running back one, maybe not an elite top 5, top 6 running back one. Like Joe Mixon could make that leap this year. I don't know that there's many other guys that could. I mean, Damian Williams could, based on the situation. But you're looking for someone to take a leap from, say, running back 2 value to running back 1 value. Those are the guys, and there's a compelling argument for any of them. Freeman has the best track record. And Aaron Jones has the chance to get out from under the yoke of Mike McCarthy and whatever he was doing to that offense. That makes Green Bay kind of a fun, unknown, positive offense. Kerryon Johnson's in the offense is just going to commit to the run, and he looked so good last year. Derrick Henry's one. I still love Corey Davis, and we'll probably end up with Corey Davis on my teams. But there's something about taking a Tennessee player lately that just makes you like, really? I'm going to take someone from Tennessee? Okay. But I am coming back to Jacobs, and I have a feeling that this is my exuberance. And then once training camps get rolling, and Doug Martin's going to get 150 carries this year, or Jalen Richard's not ever going to come off the field on third down, then I'm going to back off. But I've been taking Jacobs in the third round a lot because he's a tremendous passing down back. He's not. There's no reason to take him off the field. He's got a lot of tread on the tires. And do you remember what John Gruden did to Cadillac Williams? Do you remember what he did to him in his rookie year? Now, I'm not saying this is great for Josh Jacobs' long-term outlook.
Hey, it ran the wheels off him, right?
I mean, he just drove him over the cliff. And the possibility of getting that in this offense, and it should be a better offense with Antonio Brown. They've got a solid offensive line. John Gruden, we may mock certain things about him, but we don't mock his offenses. And Josh Jacobs is going to be a focal point of that offense. And I'm just excited to have that. Although I wouldn't talk anyone out of Aaron Jones or Kerryon Johnson or Devontae Freeman. Maybe I would talk them out of Derrick Henry.
Hey, Dwayne, you've been a big Josh Jacobs guy.
Yeah, and so there's no reason for me to really hit much more on the Josh Jacobs thing. I mean, I pretty much am in alignment with Sig on that. The way I look at these guys, I think what you have to do as a fantasy owner, and I agree, this is a great topic, Drake. I think looking at that 3-4 turn, that's where I've done several, real drafts, mid-stake type stuff. That's where I see people freezing up and using the whole clock. And they're like, which guy? And it's like a panic. It's like, oh, I guess it's Derrick Henry. And it's something you just need to sort out in your mind before you go into the draft. And the way I kind of think about it is this way. First thing I want to do with each of these guys is project their floor. I think Kerryon Johnson's floor is a little lower than Jones, for example, because he could literally be in a 3-way backfield. Now, to Sig's point, they're going to be more committed to running the ball. You've got Darrell Bevel, running the plays there now, so everybody knows Darrell Bevel from his days at Seattle. Then you got Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry is still more situational than people think. If you look at his splits when the Titans, what you need from Derrick Henry for him to pay off that value is a very hard thing to predict. And that is you need the Titans to be leading 40 to 50% of plays this year, because that's where his value came. His splits, whenever the team was leading by 3 or 7, was like 1,300 yards and something ridiculous like 20 touchdowns. In games where they were trailing by 3 or more, it was all Deion Lewis. And, Derrick Henry was on pace for like 600 yards and 3 touchdowns. So he's still going to be, I think, more up and down than I think people are starting to actually come around on this because of, Twitter, and a lot of people are starting to put this information out there. But he's still very situational. To me, Josh Jacobs and Aaron Jones and Devonta Freeman are the 2 guys most locked into their current roles. So I think they have the best, floor. To Sig's point, the talent I love the most is Kerryon Johnson. If for some reason, like Theo Riddick leaves, and there is some potential talk of him being released, and like him would be perfect. He'll go to Miami and he'll play in the new, the quasi Dolphins offense. I don't know who's going to actually catch any balls or anything down there, but if that were to happen, and now it's just Kerryon Johnson, sharing a little bit of time with CJ Anderson, man, then Kerryon would shoot up for me. But I think the guy, and I just want to get Sig's take on this too. For me, I feel like Aaron Jones does have the most upside because of how explosive he is, and they're going to be running that Shanahan Kubiak style of running game that seems to just ooze, efficiency for running backs. Now it's a matter of Aaron Rodgers and, LaFleur have got to work through whatever their differences are. Say hello to my dogs. So, yeah. So if they can work through that, and the Packers are a little more committed to the run this year, I mean, I just feel like Aaron Jones, the ceiling is probably the highest. His floor is probably second or third on the list.
Yeah, and look, I think that, and I didn't even touch on Fournette. And Fournette, I know exactly the kind of fantasy football player that's going to gravitate to Fournette, and I get it because he's the guaranteed touches guy. I mean, he maybe even going to catch 70 balls because what else are they going to do in Jacksonville this year? But I just don't get a good feeling about his stability in terms of injury history and falling out of favor with the team. Look, as you laid out, Dwayne, there could be 3, 4, 5 hits from this tier. But it is absolutely important to sort out your personal ranking of them. And this, again, I'm not going to go to the mat and say there's one order that's the right order. I would say this, Marlon Mack, maybe. So look, if you like Henry, because when the Titans are good, he'll be good. Well, as long as he stays healthy, Mack, when the Colts are good, Mack is going to be good. And the Colts could take a big step forward. So if we're applying that similar analysis to Mack that we did to Henry, when the Colts are leading, what kind of fantasy player is he? And we project the Colts to win, say, 11 games this year. Then all of a sudden, Marlon Mack, if healthy, and I'm not even that impressed by Mack as a running back, but that I end up finding myself considering him in that tier because of how much I like the Colts.
That voice you hear is Sigmund Bloom of footballguys.com. You can listen to his podcast, The Audible, anywhere that you find podcasts all over the internet, and follow him, of course, at Sigmund Bloom. And if you're looking to get a little scratch that itch for a fantasy draft, Football Guys has quite the deal for you out there, folks. Their Draft Dominator software is free. It doesn't cost you $5, $10. There's no in-app purchases that you need to do. No, this thing's free. I used it today. Go to the Apple Store, download it, look for Football Guys, the Draft Dominator. You can import your league settings from ESPN, Yahoo, whatever, and you can start drafting, mocking, just like it's draft day in your home league. So it's free. It's really cool. Great job with that, Sig, and I'm glad to have that on my phone right now. So
Go ahead.
Let me get
Sig, you designed that, right, Sig?
No, I'll just say the name Simon Shepard. Simon's the whiz behind that, and I'm just glad to be part of Football Guys. Like, I get to do what I like to do, but really, it's just it's like the fish. It's called fishbowl. It's funny, I'm thinking fishbowl sandbox. All fantasy. If you think too much about it, if it's June and you're listening to this show right now and you don't know about Football Guys, you should.
Yeah. Dwayne and I now, Scott Fishbowl competitors, I should say.
Woo!
We both got in.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we can break the great news here. We alluded to it a little earlier that Dwayne will be doing some writing for you at Football Guys.
Yeah, welcome to the Football Guys staff. Dwayne and everybody out there, welcome to Dwayne's work. If you haven't already got it through Matt Waldman, RSP, and of course everyone listening to the show already knows. So it's fun, and it's fun to continue to watch this space evolve and more people just. I look around, guys. I look at the two of you and your faces, and I look around, and I see people doing something they enjoy doing. And that is a wonderful thing to get to be around. And I think it makes our community as positive, especially for the internet, as one of the most positive communities out there.
It's a fun thing to do, talking fantasy. And I've said for the year that I've known Dwayne, he's the next big thing in fantasy. And I call him the analytical assassin.
Yeah.
And I'm super proud of him, man. And I know you're going to do great
Here's
stuff.
the next thing, really, guys, is whenever the order of society and civilization breaks down, we're going to rate our future leaders by how much we trusted their approach to fantasy football. And we're all really training to lead our own tribe or our own cult and in our little walled villages as we hunker down for whatever it is that's coming.
I'll be like analytics village. Sig, you'll be like narrative village.
Right.
I'll be
we'll
with
just sit around the fire and tell stories.
Yeah, I'll be with OJ over here talking about Patrick.
No, isn't that crazy? Ooh, and that's the thing about the fantasy football community. We're inclusive. Everyone's welcome. You love fantasy football, you're welcome. OJ, you love. Oh, well,
somebody's paying him, man. Somebody is.
He's going to make a lot of money off of being O.J. Simpson. That's just the nature, I think, of 2019 America. Yeah.
Ugh. So let's get
exactly. Well said.
So what do we do? Do we just turn off the podcast after that, Drake? No.
All right. So for the few minutes we have you left here, let's get a couple quick takes out of you. The Todd Gurley situation. People are kind of running away from him because of the knee, and they've got Darrell Henderson. They moved up to take. So where are you going to take him, if at all, in your fantasy draft?
maybe in the third round if I'm feeling frisky. But if he falls to the third round, which he might not, probably won't. I just want to see something positive, anything positive. We're still waiting. And I don't think he's going to play in the preseason, and I think they're going to prepare him in camp in a way that makes us feel like, well, what are they nursing? Like, players his age don't usually have to be on a plan or off-season program. So that's just really, I think Darrell Henderson is the direction to go here. And I think that the Rams backfield is the direction to go here. I'm just not sure about Gurley.
So Dwayne is fighting with people on Twitter about the Patriots backfield.
Yeah,
and
I'm not fighting with people. I'm not allowed to fight with people. Right? I just got an email from Sig and Joe Bryan. I can't fight with people on Twitter if I'm part of football.
Tone it down with your bombastic. Speaking of wrestling, the professional wrestling. Yeah.
So now there's no Rob Gronkowski. Sony Michel's got this bulky knee here. They go out and they draft a running back early in the third round. Where are you kind of going with this? We know we've got Julian Edelman. We've got this rookie, N'Keal Harry. Are we going James White in the fifth round? Is he really going to be kind of that slot role? Who do you like in New England?
Look, I'm not going to tell anybody they're crazy for taking James White in the fifth round, first of all, just because I think that, speaking of quarterbacks and their shelter, like James White is a shelter. And I think that we will see about Josh Gordon. Take Josh Gordon in the 12th round, see what happens. Worst thing that happens is you have an empty roster spot for the most important waiver wire run of the season. But if he gets reinstated, you may have something good. But this offense might be more of a horizontal pass offense, and that tells me Edelman and White. Michel, I think, if we're worried about Todd Gurley, we're especially worried about Michel. I wish I could remember who said it on my show like 2 months ago, but it was just a really good way to put it. It was before people started getting worried about Michel, because it was before he missed practice and before the report of an off-season procedure. But I think the fantasy football community is just way off on Damian Harris's value. He should be going in the 8th, 9th, 10th round. And look, even if Michel has a spotless summer in camp, he still should be going in the 8th, 9th, or 10th round because of Michel's history. But if Michel looks less than 100% at camp, look, the Dr. Gene Bramall football guys, and look, you're as healthy as you're going to be in camp, and you're not going to get any healthier during the year. So if Sony Michel starts out the year not 100% healthy, and I know the same thing happened last year and he came on and he did all right, but the Patriots didn't use Michel in some creative way. They used him in more of a run these bread and butter running plays, which Damian Harris might be. He's a more powerful running back, and like Josh Jacobs, he's got a lot left in the tank. So Damian Harris might have more juice than Sony Michel at this point. So I just think Damian Harris is somebody that the fantasy football community has wildly, for redraft, not for dynasty, because I still think he's a kind of average NFL running back, but an average NFL running back produces big numbers in New England.
Dwayne,
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think there's a guy we talked about last year more than Kiki Kuti from the Houston Texans. And if Kuti's healthy and Will Fuller, the touchdown machine, is healthy, you've written how Deshaun Watson is going to have a fantastic year. Not saying I'm going to spend the premium price to get a Deshaun Watson, but these wide receivers playing the second and third fiddle role here could have really, really good seasons, Dwayne. And I want to get your and Sig's view on these two players and kind of which one actually would you take first? Who do you rather have as your wide receiver 3, Kuti or Will Fuller?
I'll let Sig go first. I think I know where he's going.
Well, I think I just have Kuti a little bit ahead of Fuller, just because a healthy Fuller has been money with Deshaun Watson. It just hasn't been. Now, granted, Kuti hasn't been that healthy either. But I just want to stress, as one of the flag bearers, the love of my life got me some Kiki Cutie socks that I can wear with little hearts on them, because and some of it is we didn't even get to see the real player last year. He was never even remotely close to healthy. Mm-hmm. And a lot of his aggressiveness as a runner after the catch, his speed, his top end gear, it just wasn't there. If you go back and watch him at Texas Tech with Patrick Mahomes, that's a fun tape to watch. You can see, it's funny too, because you see with Patrick Mahomes, he could stay in stride on the deep ball. I forget the quarterback they had in right after Patrick Mahomes. Now my brain has cheese holes in it. But Kuti would be slowing down for those like they were punts compared to Mahomes. Anyway, the point is QT can give you the deep element the same way that Fuller can, which is going to be fun if they can both stay healthy and the offensive line holds up. He can be a very aggressive player, and the connection between him and Watson is proven. I mean, what did he break or tie or second over all time for catches in a debut for a rookie wide receiver?
Yeah,
he was
had a huge week.
He was hurt, and they were doing everything they could, and the offense functioned much better when he was in. And he wasn't even everything that he could offer. And you see the offseason reports that now he's healthy. Now we're excited. I still have them close, but Fuller's injury history and my excitement about QT is just barely.
Yeah, I slightly have Fuller ahead of QT, but I totally see Bloom's side of it. I'm happy to own either, to be honest. Like last week, someone took QT in a real draft I was doing. They took QT in the 7th, and they left Fuller coming, and I was in the middle. Well, I was in the 9 hole, so coming back around with the 4th pick in the 8th round, I took Fuller. I wanted to own one of the two, basically, in that range, and I was happy with either one. The one real interesting thing about Fuller, is, and you mentioned it, Drake, about, Deshaun Watson, the splits for Deshaun Watson when Will Fuller is healthy versus not, it's insane. Like over the last 2 years, if you look at Deshaun Watson, what he does when Fuller's healthy, like it would project out to like 4,700 yards and like mid 30s, high 30s touchdowns versus whenever he's not available. So I think the biggest takeaway, for me, Sig, is what you just mentioned. I want them all available because that just stresses defenses out so much between QT or Fuller, either one being able to work deep. I think QT is I think he's the better underneath route. So there's probably more versatility to his game, but I also see a possibility that with how good Deshaun Watson is and how much he's progressing, potentially QT could serve as an extension to the running game with a lot of those quick passes. It's not like Lamar Miller is just, demanding all of these touches. Of course, we could talk about Deonta Foreman, that's probably a different show, right? But, not to go off on a tangent, but man, just to see these guys together, because Hopkins gives you that intermediate, I'm open when I'm not open, no matter what kind of guy. He's the main guy. Fuller can take the top off, QT working underneath, but also has that ability. You give him the right matchup, he's got an option to take it deep. They could just do a lot of things with this offense. And that's what that gets me excited just as a football fan.
Do you want to be their GM?
Yes.
I think, I
don't know. Will I be thrown under the bus?
I suggested on one of our shows that in the XFL, because we know Eric Galco, that like me and Waldman and Lammy should be in a GM for one of the XFL teams, like run a team. So one of these times we will cross over in our lifetime, fellas. So we'll have some sort of crossover. We got NFL media people becoming GMs. A fantasy football syndicate is going to get to run a team in one of these leagues one of these days.
I just want to do the podcast for it. That's all I know.
Yeah, see, I like that. You just give me the play-by-play announcer.
Think of the confidence. We'll just be like, we've been screwing this kind of stuff up for years, guys. Yeah, we can do it at the real level,
and it'll be entertaining, and everybody can project themselves into it, like what they would, or even better. Let's option this. And do you know any people we can get like movie option scripts? Because let's do here's the movie script. Let's just skip right ahead from forget about it happening. Like when the fantasy, they probably could sell that and make hundreds of millions of dollars off of it. So
I'll talk to OJ, see who he knows.
Ooh, OJ does a cameo. I think that's one of the only ways that we could justify that.
Before we let you out of here, last thing, give me one good memory of Syracuse, New York.
Oh wow! See, so let me tell you, the first thing that I'm gonna say is the first thing that pops into my head is things that it's college students. What was there at South Park? Like there's a time and place for everything in college, right? And it's Oakwood Cemetery.
Oh, wow.
Beside the university is a wonderful place to explore. And I had
a cemetery, Sig?
It's a right. It's a cemetery. It sprawls for acres and acres and acres, and it has all these interesting mausoleums and hills and nooks and crannies. It's almost like a park. And remember, I'm in New Orleans,
it's
so of
wedged
course
between a neighborhood and a highway.
Yeah.
My daughter is fascinated with graves in New Orleans. Anytime we drive through, it's just like, this is fascinating.
And that is a manifestation of a larger sense of like your ancestors and wasn't there saying like the past isn't dead, it isn't even past, like the past is still with us. And in New Orleans, absolutely, people have that, so that fascination goes along with that. But Syracuse in the summer when the weather's nice and the university was quiet, there was a lot of really cool stuff happening there. And I know there's still a lot of really cool stuff happening there. And I have a lot of very positive memories associated. In my record collection over here, I still have a lot of Oliver's records labels from Marshall Street. And I would only light up or say very positive things about my time there, despite the weather.
Oh, the weather's the worst. Well, thank you very much. Sigmund Bloom from Football Guys. Follow him at Sigmund Bloom. Listen to the Audible anywhere you can find a podcast, and go download that free Draft Dominator software and just get better and help kick all your league mates' butts this year. Sigmund, thank you so much for taking a few minutes here for the Fantasy Football Hustle.
Oh, and I love the hustle, by the way. It's like a triple entendre, right? Because there's like hustle to win. There's hustle, like I'm going to hustle you. And then, of course, there's the hustle. Do the hustle. Do, 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 do. So it's beautiful, beautiful.
Cool, man. Thank you so much, man. We'll wrap things up here. Me and Dwayne, we'll let Mr. Bloom head on down the road. We appreciate it. And again, go follow him. Get on Football Guys. Subscribe to their site. And just be a better football player. So thank you, Mr. Bloom.
My pleasure.
All right, Dwayne, there we go. Sigmund Bloom joining us here on the Fantasy Football Hustle. What's your biggest takeaway from what you heard out of Sigmund?
I love getting Sigmund's, his zoom out, the big takes. He talks to so many really smart people in the industry, and that's something that I've always, admired about him, is he takes that information and, then he has his own, work that he's doing looking at it. And, I like that he's very open, to, okay, maybe this could work, or maybe, this would be, something that I didn't think about that, it actually could work out this way. So just hearing him, go through it, I think, the biggest takeaways for me, is if you think about the Cardinals offense, where the value could come from. I'm still a little scared of David Johnson, like in the mid first, just because of the receivers I can take, but he is right. It's the offense. It's an offense that, the league, hasn't seen. So, I may need to be just a little bit more open to that. The other thing is around with Gurley. He really confirmed for me where my head is at on Todd Gurley. So, one thing kind of pushing me back, making me think again, but then there's another thing kind of confirming for me where I'm at. I don't see a reason to take Gurley, before the end of the second round or early third. And the simple reason, there's just two quick things. One, even if you put Gurley's injury aside, let's just set it aside for a second. Sean McVay has wanted to bring in a pass catching back since he first got there. He had Lance Dunbar. It didn't work out. He's giddy about having, someone that he can use in the passing game. So Gurley's going to lose touches in the passing game no matter what. Now, factor in the fact that Gurley could be managed and his carries could be reduced. That's two. Then three, factor in he could literally be shut down for periods of time in the year, either based on, arthritis and something flaring up with the knee, or, they could be 10-0. They are a really good team. And all of a sudden they're like, we don't really need Todd Gurley for the next 2 or 3 games. Let's let Henderson, take more of the role, or, let's let Malcolm Brown take on more of the role. Mm-hmm. So with Gurley, for me, the problem is if you want to take him in the first round, you have to still believe that his upside is 325 to 350 points, because his downside is too big. And I just don't see a path to his upside being 350. And his downside is it could be 150 if his knee blows up. So it's just a balancing act, because now I look at the other guys I can get at the end of the first, whether it's, one of the big name receivers or whatever. And I have a much more stable look at what my floor is going to be. And I still get a reasonable ceiling. Whereas I don't get those two things with Todd Gurley.
I really liked hearing his take on the Steelers, and especially Vance McDonald. I've been a guy who's focused on Hunter Henry in drafts, and the two guys, if I don't get Hunter Henry, I'm looking at are Vance McDonald and Jared Cook. So just kind of getting reaffirmed, somebody who's in tune with that team, that he's going to get the targets, and there's that big opportunity there. So those are guys I really like at the tight end position.
Yeah, and I mean, I like McDonald better than Hunter Henry. I like him better than Evan Ingram. I like him far better than Jared Cook. Honestly, I have him just behind O.J. Howard, which, we have talked about that some. But, yeah, that was a big reaffirmation for me, as well. I just don't see a way that Vance McDonald doesn't end up as a top 6 tight end other than injury.
So we broke the news here that Mr. McFarland, who, if you're new to the show, is a very successful high-stakes fantasy football player, and he's won a ton of cash doing that. And if you want to win a ton of cash, go over to playffwc.com. They've got a lot of great stuff over there at Full-Time Fantasy, and you can play for as little as like $35. You can play some best ball stuff. But Dwayne, we broke the news that you're going to be writing for footballguys.com. So congratulations. And what kind of stuff can we expect from you going forward over on the site?
Sig and I are still working through what exactly, I'll be covering. We're kind of going back and forth on a couple of ideas. Obviously, I want to help out with some of the coaching changes. That's something that I'm pretty passionate about, and what kind of impact that could potentially have on offenses. Another thing I'm really fascinated by, and I think you saw some of this last year, is I love looking at range of outcomes for players, right? Especially for players that we may not feel as comfortable with. So talking about that running back range where you got Josh Jacobs, you got Aaron Jones, you got Kerryon Johnson. I think it's really important to have a really good feel for really what you think their floor, a confident floor, right? So for Kerryon, it could be a little bit lower than a Josh Jacobs because he could potentially be dealing with 3 running backs. So it's helping walk through people through, okay, Kerryon Johnson's floor is slightly lower than Josh Jacobs, but maybe his ceiling is higher. And that's the kind of information for me when I'm drafting and I'm thinking about my roster construction and I'm trying to put my strategy together to win my league. Say my first 2 picks are, say they're super safe. Say I land DeAndre Hopkins in the first, and then I land Juju Smith-Schuster, 2 guys that could easily both have 100 to 180 targets. So I feel really good about my 2 receivers. Maybe my strategy is I want to swing for more upside in the 3rd round because that's my personality and that makes me comfortable. Or maybe my personality is I like to play a little bit more safe. It's all about you being you. And that's the kind of information I try to give to people so that, hey, I'm not saying it's necessarily just this way or that way, but here's the pros of this guy versus this guy. So if you're more comfortable and your biggest concern is having an established floor and you're willing to take less upside based on the way you want to build the rest of your roster, I think that's huge information that a lot of people miss. And then once you make that pick, right? Once you make that 3rd round pick, let's say you went with upside, then I'm going to be breaking down guys that in the 4th, 5th, and 6th could give you a higher floor, right? So you can really put together, hopefully what it will do is allow people to feel very confident about where they have people ranked. And so when they come into the draft, they're going to feel really good about the players they're taking, and they're going to think a lot more about roster construction than maybe they did in the past.
And if you want to get a little taste of what Dwayne's done in the past, you can go over to fightingchancefantasy.com. He's got a couple of articles up there, including a really smart article on being a better drafter and figuring out who you are in the draft. Just give people a little, before we get out of here, a little taste of what that was, that article on Fighting Chance.
Yeah, some of it goes along with what we were just talking about. The real key is, so one big thing that I've learned in drafting with high stake and mid stake players, over and over the last 10 years, there's a lot of really smart people. And so I try to pick up on, what are the things they do well. And then, I'm constantly iterating to try and make myself better from a process standpoint of the way I approach the draft. So basically this is me just sharing my last 10 years of experience and starting to create a spectrum of what level of fantasy player, you may be. So you can read it and you can actually grade yourself. And I laid out the first 3 levels of fantasy players. And so, folks can go over to Fighting Chance to read it and get more detail, but the essentials are, level 1 is somebody that just is, you come into the draft, you're super prepared. You know where all your information is. You're not looking at 20 different sources. Your league mates. Essentially, like I give it the analogy of if people like poker, you know what your hand is. You have pocket kings to start. That's a great start. You could still lose the hand from there, but you come in confident and you're ready to go. The second level is you start to understand what the players around you, what their hands are. So that's a level 2 poker player. Well, the level 2 fantasy player is someone that has a full awareness. Oh, I'm coming to the turn in round 3, going into round 4. I don't have a receiver yet. Neither do the 3 guys behind me. They all have already taken running backs. Those are simple things I just see people miss. I need to go ahead and take the runner there and then turn around and come back and get, I need to go ahead and take the receiver there. And even though there may be a runner I like, the likelihood, let's say they all started with 3 running backs, let the running back go by. Take the receiver that they're going to want. And what you're trying to do is maximize on a round-to-round basis of creating the best potential player combinations. And then the last level starts to get in what we talked about a minute ago. That's really thinking multiple moves ahead. And the way you think multiple moves ahead, you have to know where the value sits in the draft for high floor players and then high ceiling players. And then based on the way the first 3 or 4 rounds go, essentially, you may know, for example, I've got to set a pick aside for Vance McDonald in the 7th. I need to go ahead and do that now. Okay, so that means in the 8th round, I'm thinking this. In the 6th round, I may need to think this. here's my alternate plans if those things don't go well. You're plotting those things out the whole time you're going. And that way, when it gets to you, you don't panic. You're ready. You're prepared. And you're maximizing your roster construction. So that's kind of a taste of it. People can get more detail. And there's a couple of other levels that I'll break down as the summer goes on. There's 5 levels that I consider, but those are the first 3.
So I hope you guys who are new to the show got a good feel for what we do here at the Fantasy Football Hustle. That's Dwayne McFarland. Follow him at Dwayne McFarland. Spell it DWAIN. You can follow me at Drake Fantasy and follow the show, of course, at FF Hustle. Thank you so much to Sigmund Bloom. What a great honor it was to have him on the show. We really appreciate it. And for everybody else out there, go check him out over at Football Guys. Download the Draft Dominator. Read our work over at FightingChanceFantasy.com. And congratulations to Dwayne. We'll see you guys next week.
This has been the Fantasy Football Hustle. We're back next week with all you need for waiver wire, trades, roster management, and more. Until then, never get out hustled.